Welcome back to Missing Dots, the discussion where we unpack the roots of religious traditions with fresh insights and historical depth. I'm your host, Zahid, and today we're diving into a pivotal moment in Islamic history, the shift of the Qibla, the sacred direction Muslims face in prayer. Was there a divine command to start with Jerusalem's Bayt al-Maqdis when Salah first became obligatory? We'll explore Quranic verses, Hadith narrations, and scholarly takes to uncover the story. Stick around, this one's a real turning point. So my first question is, when was the first time Muslims were introduced to Salahs 5 times a day?
Sure, I will try to go deeply to cover all aspects. Let's discuss first the historical context. The 5 daily prayers, Salah in Islam, were established as a core pillar of the faith during the Prophet Muhammad's lifetime in the early 7th century AD, in Mecca and Medina. Prior to this, Muslims observed fewer prayers, typically 2 or 3 times a day, based on Quranic verses like Surah Hud 11 verse 114 and Surah Al-Isra 17 verse 78, which mention dawn and dusk prayers. Now, the introduction of 5 prayers. The first time Muslims were introduced to the 5 daily prayers Fajr, dawn, Dhuhr, noon, Asar, afternoon, Maghrib, sunset, and Isha, night, occurred during the Prophet Muhammad's miraculous night journey, Isra and Miraj, on 27 Rajab, 621 AD, approximately 12 years after the start of his prophethood in 610 AD. Now let's explore the key details from Islamic tradition, according to authentic Hadith narrations in Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 58, Hadith 228, and Sahih Muslim, Book 1, Hadith 309. Muhammad was transported from the Kaaba in Mecca to Jerusalem, Isra, and then ascended to the heavens, Miraj, where he met previous prophets and received divine instructions from Allah. Initially, Allah commanded 50 prayers per day. On the Prophet's intercession, guided by Prophet Moses, this was gradually reduced to 5 prayers per day, with the reward equivalent to 50, as per the same Hadith sources. This revelation was delivered directly to Muhammad in the heavens. Upon returning to Mecca that same night, the Prophet shared this with his companions, including Abu Bakr and others present. The 5 prayers were then practiced by the early Muslim community starting immediately, though full communal observance solidified after the Hijrah to Medina in 622 AD. Now let's see what are the evidence and the sources. In the primary texts, the Quran does not explicitly detail the 5 prayers but alludes to their timing, like Surah Al-Baqarah 2 verse 238 urges guarding prayers, including the middle one interpreted as Asar Salah. The specifics come from Hadith, considered reliable in Sunni tradition, the majority view. Now let's check the scholarly consensus. Historians like Ibn Ishaq in Sirat Rasul Allah, 8th century, and modern scholars like Curran Armstrong and Muhammad, a prophet for our time, date the Miraj to 621 AD based on lunar calendar correlations and early biographies. But Shia traditions slightly differ on the exact date but agree on the Miraj as the origin, emphasizing its spiritual significance. This event marks the formal introduction, transforming prayer from a flexible practice into a structured 5-fold obligation still observed by over 1.8 billion Muslims today. For deeper reading, refer to Sahih al-Bukhari or Ibn Kathir's tafsir.
So my last question is, as mentioned in the Quran, Muslims were commanded during prayer to change the direction of the Qibla from Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem to Kaaba. In Mecca, is there any verse in the Quran or any hadith that indicates that when prayer was first made obligatory, Muslims were instructed to face Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem?
My direct answer is no. Neither the Quran nor any authentic hadith explicitly states that when prayer, Salah, was first made obligatory, Muslims were instructed to face Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, as the Qibla. The Quran does not detail the initial obligation of prayer or specify a Qibla at that stage. Hadith narrations also do not provide a clear instruction for the earliest prayers. Instead, they imply that the Jerusalem Qibla was the established practice during the Meccan period, before the Hijrah in 622 AD, which predates the formal fivefold obligation via the Miraj in 621 AD. The change to the Kaaba as Qibla is explicitly commanded in the Quran during the Medinan period, confirming the prior use of Jerusalem. Let's explore the Quranic evidence. The Quran mentions the Qibla change in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse from 142 to 145, which presupposes that Muslims were already facing Jerusalem. The Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 142 says, "The foolish among the people will say, 'What has turned them away from their Qibla, which they used to face?' Say one to Allah belongs the east and the west. He guides whom He wills to a straight path." This verse indicates that the original Qibla was a known practice, which they used to face, and people questioned the shift, implying it was Jerusalem. And Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 144 says, "We have certainly seen the turning of your face, O Muhammad, toward the heaven, and we will surely turn you to a Qibla with which you will be pleased. So turn your face toward Al-Masjid Al-Haram, the Kaaba, and wherever you believers are, turn your faces toward it in prayer." This commands the new direction, Kaaba, and acknowledges the Prophet's prior orientation toward the heaven, interpreted by scholars as seeking divine guidance on the Qibla, with Jerusalem as the previous one. These verses were revealed in Medina around 623 to 624 AD, about 1 to 2 years after the Hijrah, confirming the Jerusalem Qibla as the norm before that point. However, the Quran does not reference an explicit initial command for it when prayer became obligatory. Now let's see evidence from Hadiths. Authentic Hadith collections, like Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, describe the Qibla change but do not record a specific instruction for the very first obligatory prayers. Instead, they support the historical practice of facing Jerusalem during the Meccan era, like Sahih al-Bukhari, Book 8. Hadith 392 says, which is narrated by Ibn Umar. While the people were offering the Fajr prayer at the mosque of the Prophet in Medina, they were surprised to see the Prophet facing the Kaaba. They asked, "What is this?" He replied, "The Qibla has been changed towards the Kaaba." This describes the moment of change, but implies prior prayers in Medina were toward Jerusalem. Similar Sahih Muslim, Book 4, Hadith 1061 says, a narration from Anas ibn Malik details the revelation of Surah 2, verse 144, where the Prophet was praying toward Jerusalem, then received the command to turn toward the Kaaba mid-prayer. Companions like Abu Bakr and Umar were present, and they adjusted accordingly. Again, this confirms Jerusalem as the pre-changed direction but not its initial establishment. Scholars like Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani in Fath al-Bari, commentary on Bukhari, and al-Nawawi in Sharh Muslim explain that the Jerusalem Qibla was adopted by early Muslims in Mecca as a continuation of the Abrahamic tradition, honoring prophets like Moses and Jesus who prayed toward it. Based on the Prophet's example, it was not commanded in a revelatory sense like the later change, but became the de facto direction before the 5 prayers were formalized. Now let's dig more to see what historical and scholarly context says. Prayer as a practice began early in the Prophet's mission, around 610 to 613 AD, with 2 to 3 daily prayers, facing Jerusalem. The Miraj, 621 AD, established 5 prayers, still with Jerusalem as Qibla. The shift to Kaaba occurred post-Hijrah. Tafsir works, like Ibn Kathir's Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim, and Sirah, biographies, by Ibn Ishaq, affirm this sequence without citing an explicit initial command. The lack of such a verse or hadith suggests it was an organic adoption, divinely endorsed until the change. So important point arises here: why no explicit command? Islamic tradition views the Jerusalem Qibla as a transitional phase linking Judaism and Christianity to Islam, honored until the Kaaba's centrality was emphasized to distinguish the faith. For further reading, consult Sahih al-Bukhari's Book of Characteristics of Prayer, or Ibn Kathir's Tafsir, on Surah 2, verses from 142 to 150.
Thank you for such clarifications, dear, and there you have it, the Qibla's journey from a shared sacred site to Islam's beating heart in Mecca. It's a reminder that faith often builds on what came before. only to reveal its full light later. What do you think? Does this change your view on prayer's origins? Drop a comment or voice note on our site. Thanks for tuning into Missing Dots. Subscribe for more episodes unpacking the unseen threads of belief. Until next time, keep seeking that straight path. Assalamu alaikum and peace out.